Okay.
Perfect. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to do a holiday podcast with the incomparable Larry Burns. This podcast that I've created, Art of Healthy Retirement, has two goals. The first is to support business experts who are transforming from a career to healthy retirement, or those who have retired as former long-standing careers. Format is simple. It's on Zoom. It's typically under an hour, and it'll be posted on my YouTube channel under my name, Nancy Schwartz. And the interview focuses on how our guests are living or will be living their ideal retirement with health. And no interview is the same. And that's the joy of these discussions. We're disrupting the way you think about healthy retirement in real time. Each podcast is educational in content and offers inspiration to others by showcasing the incredible guests living life on their own terms. So Larry and I met each other on a networking get-together that encompassed many people, and Larry really stood out as far as the people that I could relate to, and he graciously approached me. And Larry's hashtags on his LinkedIn tell you a lot about him. First T, on the move, and bow tie Friday, and caring for kids. Larry is currently the sitting president and CEO of a company which he's going to detail for us, the Proper Group, which is an extraordinary group that he's put together that assists nonprofits and higher educational institutions in the verticals of marketing and branding, staff and board development, as well as strategic planning and implementation. And it's very client-centric, and that's what really attracted me to Larry, is how client-centered he is. Prior to that, he was president and CEO of the Children's Foundation, as well as the Children's Hospital of Michigan. And prior to that, he lived in the academic world, serving the University of Akron, as well as the University of Toledo. So welcome, Larry. I'm so excited that you're here, and thank you so much for doing this podcast with us and to share your wonderful life and what you're doing now and how you're living in health. So welcome.
Well, thanks, Nancy, and it's an honor to be with you, and happy holidays to you and your family and all of your viewers and listeners. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about you, Larry. Who are you? and how did you come up through the ranks of really academia and focus on huge institutional foundations that really help children?
Wonderful, thank you. So I grew up in the Detroit area. I went to an all-boys school for high school, and then to Central Michigan University. Graduated and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something that involved public speaking, engagement with people on a dynamic way. And so I was fortunate to find a job with the United Way. And it was what I like to say, Nancy, it was a time when the United Way nationally was at its peak. And I had the opportunity to spend 7 years, this is in Detroit, at the United Way. It was called the United Foundation back then. And it really was the launching of a couple things regarding my career. One, it gave me the opportunity at a young age to work with Fortune 100 CEOs, staffing them during what we called in Detroit the Torch Drive. The last year I was there, we raised $50 million.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we also ran a campaign each year for something that was the first urban coalition in the United States called New Detroit. It was formed after the riots in Detroit. It's all corporate and foundation giving, and I helped orchestrate that as well as the Torch Drive. So I worked with all these business people, mostly men, but not all, And it really gave me an opportunity to view firsthand what made people successful. At the same time, I admired the CEO of the United Way, gentleman by the name of H. Clay Howell, who was a very dapper dresser. And I started developing my own personal brand. And I realized that when you go into a meeting with CEOs, that you're judged instantly. And a lot of times that is how you present yourself, not only in the way your manners are, in the way you speak, but also in the way you present yourself in dressing. So anyway, it was a great education for me, and it was an opportunity to really get started in my career. So I did that for 7 years, and then one of my volunteers asked me to join his firm, one of the largest architectural firms in the United States, which is now known as the Smith Group. And I had an opportunity to do public affairs for the clients and for the firm. We had offices in Washington, in Atlanta, Toronto, and Detroit. So I went from managing a whole big staff at the United Way to being a one-person shop. And I gained insight into media relations, public affairs, and that was outstanding. And then I had the opportunity after that to go back into the nonprofit world and work at Children's Hospital in Detroit and help them raise money for a new building. And then I was asked to join, at the time, the Medical College of Ohio, a freestanding medical school in Toledo. And it was relatively young. It was 25 years old when I joined them. And I oversaw their foundation as president of their foundation, and also alumni relations and fundraising. And then I had a unique opportunity to help merge that organization. This was a state-assisted college. I had the opportunity to work with the leadership in Toledo and in Columbus to merge that organization with the University of Toledo.
Wow.
And we became, in 2006, the third largest state-supported university in Ohio, behind Ohio State and Cincinnati. And what that gave me was a whole new view of what I could do to help an organization. And my boss, Dr. Lloyd Jacobs, he asked me if I would take on enrollment. And I said, Dr. Jacobs, I don't know much about enrollment. And he said, well, either do I. He's a vascular surgeon. He said, but I know they're not doing very well. I said, okay. So I had the opportunity to hire some really good people, and we had record enrollment years for a number of years running. And I oversaw public relations, marketing, branding. I worked very closely with athletics, because when you're a mid-major university, kind of unknown to many parts of the country, many times your athletic teams are a way to brand the university.
It's very much branding. It's very an attraction. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And the most recent example of that is I'm now living in Stuart, Florida, in South Florida. And last year, Florida Atlantic University men's basketball team made it to the Final Four.
Wow.
And they became very popular, and their enrollment is at record levels. So anyway, I used athletics at the University of Toledo to rebrand this organization, and it worked very, very well. And so I also was asked by President Jacobs to be the vice president for diversity, which I was honored to do, because it just gave me an opportunity to add additional things, particularly as diversity and things of that nature were becoming more and more important, never more important than today, as you know.
Yes, yes.
And so I did that. And each step of the way in my career, I was trying to add additional sort of items to my portfolio. I didn't want to stay sort of isolated in one thing or two things. So I never said no to anything, even though in many cases, I had no experience in it, but I never said no. And I always had enough confidence in myself and the people around me to make sure that we would be successful. And so I think that was an important part of my career development, of having the willingness to take on things and do some risk taking and exploring, and just kept adding to my portfolio. And then I had the opportunity, a friend of mine became the president of the University of Akron. He asked me to come there with him. I did that. His tenure was relatively short due to a number of things that happened in Akron that happen a lot of higher education. And so that was a short stay. And then I had the opportunity to go back to Detroit. My mom, who at the time was 97 years old,
My goodness. Wow.
and just went into assisted living. It was an opportunity for my wife, Judy, and I to go back to Detroit. And I became the president and the CEO of the Children's Foundation. This was a unique opportunity that I have to tell you that if I was in the middle of my career, I might not have taken it. Because what happened to this foundation, Nancy, is that they were part of the Children's Hospital of Michigan. That hospital was sold to Tenet Healthcare and became a for-profit hospital. So philanthropy really was no longer as relevant as it was. So the foundation was an orphan, was put off to the side. It had a great deal of money, but really no longer, what I like to say, it no longer had a parent.
Right, not mission critical. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they went through a number of leadership changes, and they just struggled. And so they approached me, and they saw what I did at the University of Toledo, and they felt that maybe I was the right person to define where they were going to go. Again, it was an opportunity to go back to Detroit, be closer to my mom, and a real challenge to make this foundation something that would help it survive in a healthy way. So I did that for 6 years. We changed the name. It was still called the Children's Hospital Michigan Foundation. It was very confusing. We changed the name to the Children's Foundation. And what we started doing is starting to fund organizations regarding the social determinants of health. So when you're part of a hospital foundation, you're primarily supporting things that help the hospital care for, in this case, kids. What we were trying to do is keep kids healthy and keep them out of the hospital. So we started supporting programs, particularly in mental health, particularly in helping kids that were underserved stay healthy, not only mentally, but physically. Boys and Girls Club and things of that nature. So we started with 4 partners. And when I left last year, we had 170.
Wow, that's such cutting edge stuff. I mean, it's just so amazing. I'm sure the transformations in not only your community, but in the programs that you funded have really helped.
Yeah, it was very rewarding, and developed a new brand. What I tried to do is take all the things I learned over the last decades and sort of combine them into one mission and help this organization thrive. And I'm fortunate to say that when I left in December of last year, they were in a very, very good place, and they still remain so today.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. That's a huge cap to your career.
Yeah, and it was very rewarding, and I had great help on the staff side. I had a wonderful board, recruited dozens of people to be on the board, and it was probably the best experience in my 45-year career that I had professionally. So that's sort of, in a more than a nutshell, sorry, it is my career. And then my wife and I, during the pandemic, as we all know, things were very odd during the pandemic. I was working at home. We always wanted to move to Florida eventually when I retired. So we expedited that, and we actually found a home in Stuart, Florida, 3 years ago, and then I commuted for a year and a half or so from Detroit to Stewart, and then last December left the organization, and everyone congratulated me. You'll like this. Congratulated me on my retirement. And I kept saying, well, thank you, first of all, but I'm not really retiring.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started forming the proper group.
So how did that thinking for you come about, that you're so what's the word, ambitious and definitive that, yes, I have this great many runs at CEO, but I'm not done yet. So how did that come about for you? What was the process?
Well, yeah, I still have a lot of energy left. And I worked for people, mostly men, but some women as well. But I always worked for somebody, and I always worked for a board.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to myself, I've done all these things. I'm very grateful and fortunate. But now I want to work on things that I truly have passion for and want to make a difference helping other people be successful. So I was getting rid of that stress of working for somebody. And again, when you're in the professions that I was in, you not only have a direct boss, but in the, let's say, the Children's Foundation side, I had, 30 board members or so.
Wow.
That I saw as each and every one of them as my boss. And so I didn't have that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, what do I want to do? And so I wrote down all of the things that I did during my career, things I just mentioned and some other things. And I decided that I wanted to isolate on several of those. And I wanted to help organizations get stronger, better, more successful. And there's a lot of things I don't do. So I needed to have a sort of a consortium of people, be it in writing, be it in design, be it in media purchasing. And in today's world, as you well know, this fractional employment becoming very popular. And I think the pandemic sort of moved that faster than it would have, just because people were working at home. And as you know, and as I know, because we read about it all the time, that there's a lot of people that don't want to go back to the office.
Exactly.
And so I started approaching people that I started or I had worked with during my career who I admire, and asked them if they'd be willing to join my proper group. And when I had a client that needed their services, then we would incorporate them into the relationship. And so that's sort of the idea of the proper group. And so what we're concentrating on is, as you mentioned, nonprofits and colleges, universities, and some high schools, helping them in things like enrollment growth, marketing, branding, board development, coaching CEOs, recruitment of staff, which in the nonprofit world, as you well know, I mean, you know better than anybody, recruiting the right people is critical to this success. And it tends to, in many communities, sort of be a revolving door.
Yes. And or revolving door of institutions. They go
yes. Yeah. And so what I like to say is that I didn't retire. I've dramatically changed my professional life, and I'm reinventing myself at age 67.
I love it. I love it.
And I have to say, it's been a year. And there's been some challenges. I used to have great support, a wonderful administrative assistant, and a wonderful staff. And now it's primarily my wife and I. And I'm not the most tech savvy person in the world. And so that's, I've kind of had to learn more than I knew before. But but I wanted to stay relevant in that regard. And so, like you, I started a podcast. In fact, you're going to be a guest on my January episode, because I was a radio host for over 25 years in Toledo, Akron, and Detroit. I liked that, and I didn't want to give that up. So I'm using sort of the podcast. It's called Discovering the Power of You, is a way to stay relevant and to stay connected to my friends and new friends like you. And so this adjustment from being fully engaged in a CEO job to being this person now living in Stuart, Florida, not really knowing many people, it's been an adjustment on having enough confidence in myself and what I want to do to stay with it and be resilient, and develop relationships like you and I developed when we were on that call a couple months ago.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that resilience, because I think that what you do is very common, if I may say, use that word, that CEOs move to another place, right? Because they may be in a place that either, I just talked to someone who's in a succession plan. Well, he's in this company, but that's not where they're going to live permanently, right? So they're gonna make a change. How did you build that toughened muscle for yourself? You have that vision of this new company that you want to drive forward. You've gotten this beautiful consortium of people, which is more than just you. So that's, you built this entity that can serve, higher education, foundations, etc. But how do you light that fire underneath yourself to build that resiliency? Does that come through your heart or passion, or how do you define that for yourself?
Well, great. That's a great question in a couple ways. One is, particularly working in higher education for 27 years, it is, at times it's very stressful, and between dealing with students, dealing with faculty, dealing with board members, dealing with community and alumni, if you aren't strong and resilient, and you don't build that up, you won't survive in higher ed. And I think if you were, you know this, but if you were to ask any senior administrator at a university or college, they would agree with me that the weak people need to get strong, or they just won't survive.
Right.
So through that, as painful as many of those times were, I grew to be resilient with grit and always taking the high road when it wasn't always the easy road.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a big part of this. And then the other part is, I've had cancer 3 times.
Oh my.
So I had tongue cancer, in surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, and that was very challenging. And without my friends, and particularly without my wife, I'm not sure what would have happened. But I had to grow in resilience, and have faith that I would get better, and that we can move forward. And then, so we got through that. Then I had prostate cancer, and that was another issue. And then more recently, I had melanoma living in Florida. And so, that it just, those things either will crush you or make you stronger. So I think those things with my career and the positions I had and the things that I did, allowed me to grow in the resilience factor. And then some of my health issues allowed me to do that as well. And resilience and grit and having faith that things are going to get better, I think, are really important. And what I'm hoping to do, one of the reasons I thought you and I would hit it off is that what I want to do is to help people who are retiring, particularly those in the senior level positions, who no longer have the things that they are used to. Some of, airplanes and all sorts of things.
Well, it's the infrastructure of the corporation. It's
Yeah.
available at any time. And when you don't understand that, it's difficult to imagine. But when you have it, because you're a global company, or you have to go to multiple locations, or you need a team. There's no way that one person can do all of this in an allotted period of time.
So I'm hoping that I can also reach out and help individuals that have retired or left their senior position, and maybe help them find something in philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they have a family foundation that I can help guide them. I love doing that, generational change for particularly those people that own their own companies, as you know, better than I do, that can be very challenging with kids and grandkids and that. But to really help individuals that have recently retired sort of find their way from a philanthropic standpoint, either by creating a family, and I've helped create several family foundations. The most recent one is the Jamie Daniels Foundation, which you and I chatted about. That a great.
You did some extraordinary work, not only operationally, but from leadership as well. And you've as the foundation has moved, you've moved within the organization to support them.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping in what you do or in helping people adjust to their new lifestyle and retirement, that maybe there's something that I can add to say to someone, hey, have you thought about a family foundation? Have you thought about creating an organization that you might have passion for, that you care about, and it will give you a great purpose to keep moving forward and stay active. Unfortunately, in many cases, it's a family tragedy that inspires them, like losing a child or someone. But it doesn't have to be the case. It can be just something that like First Tee you mentioned. I helped start First Tee in Detroit, and it's a wonderful way to help youngsters in Detroit, for the most part, underserved, don't know golf from soccer. And it really isn't so much about golf as it is teaching them life lessons like resilience, like integrity, honesty. And so many of the coaches or volunteers for First Tee are people that are retired. And it gives it, they keep active in golf, but most importantly, they're helping youngsters. And so anyway, that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you to say, hey, as you come across people that you serve, there might be a way for me to take my experience and help them gain a new direction in what they want to do.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that there's nothing better than talking to somebody who's a step ahead of you, right? To show the way. And that's really what you're offering, is that you've been that, but now you're this. And that's the pathway to show people that A, it's possible, but B, to give a different perspective. Have you thought of this? And most people who are operating, and as you certainly know, because you were 24/7, that no, I haven't, because I haven't had time to even think about that yet.
Right.
So to have people say, oh, what about this? What about this? I mean, I felt all I knew was, and we discussed this, was retained executive search. But then when I wasn't doing it, it's like, wow, look at that. There's other things out there, for the first time. Right.
Well, and you have a great arts background and a dance background that you have a passion for. But a lot of successful people, and I think you're kind of alluding to it, they don't, because they've been so busy either raising their family and having a successful career. And how many times do we hear people say, God, I can't golf every day, or I can't do this. So, we got to help them find additional things to do, be it cooking, be it a philanthropic initiative, be it what have you. And I think, kind of kiddingly, the latest craze for these people have been pickleball, because it seems like everywhere I see pickleball is becoming the really popular sport, but can't play pickleball every day. And so just want to help people find something with a little bit additional reward for their efforts.
Yeah, and I think that can come in many different ways. And why not pickleball? Maybe you're mentoring somebody on a court in life, or on doing pickleball, or when in golf tees, or whatever that opportunity is. And I think what people need to realize, and then I think this is what you're saying, is that these individuals, and I think you and I'd like to be included in this bucket, have had extraordinary experiences in our lifetime. And I really feel that I want to contribute to not only to pass that down, but to grow it forward. And I think that that's a luxury from my point of view, that, wow, I really could make an impact here somehow.
Absolutely. And as you know, probably better than me, there are several professions like accounting at big firms or law firms where, you know, I left at age 67. And a lot of accounting firms, they're forced to retire at 50. Or a law firm, you know, they want the older partners to exit, so the younger people see a chance to become so those people, you know, work so hard to obtain partnership, and then at a young age, younger than me, they're out.
Right.
And those are the people that financially are probably in a great position to start something like a family foundation, like a philanthropic passion. And so, you know, that's one of the things I want to try to help folks with.
Well, we need to make sure that they find you to be able to build that entity. And we're going to put all your contact information in the show notes. Absolutely. So tell us, what have you done to improve your health that you didn't do while you were operating? That you've found, maybe a tip or two that you found that's very useful for the way you live your life now.
Well, I think, you know, I always was a runner. I did smoke cigars, so I stopped that. And I enjoyed those, but I did stop that based on the tongue cancer. And, you know, to make sure that, you know, exercise now, I'm more of a walker than a runner, and that particularly dealing with my mental health, my stress levels, I think those have such an enormous impact on our overall health. I think, you know, the prostate cancer was, you know, I don't know if it's just bad luck or whatever, but, you know, it is what it is. And one of the things that we've done, certainly in Florida now, moving across the country, is we have my wife and I have all new doctors. And even though I don't particularly enjoy going to the doctor, we go, I have several of them. The other thing I didn't mention is that I had my valve replaced a few years ago at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland. And so, you know, I always see a cardiologist. So making sure that you exercise, that you eat correctly, that you manage your stress and and just because you're not working doesn't mean you can't have stress. So you have to manage that. So you sleep well, and then making sure you are preventative with going to the doctor, particularly as we get older. And just making sure that you're doing that on a regular basis, because we're fortunate enough in this country that preventative medicine in many ways can help things that come up that we don't want. So those would be my thoughts, and that's that I'm trying to do. My parents, you know, didn't do that. You know, my mom never went she lived to be 100, but she didn't go to a hospital or a doctor for like 30 years. And she was lucky, but in today's world, you know, one of my key advice to myself all the time is make sure you do what the doctor says and you actually go there and do it in a religious way. So
Yeah, well, I think that it's a mindset, right? So going to your appointments and being accountable to the preventive, right? But also doing the things, releasing that stress, taking that exercise component, whatever works for you, eating well, highly nutritious, there's so many things that we can do that almost we don't even need to worry about the preventive, because we know our preventive is going to be a clean bill of health. We want to support our health before we become disease states.
right.
So I think that it's the future looking in the present now that we're acting.
Right.
So yeah. So I love that. So that's a big step to do that. Not everybody does that, Larry. So congratulations. That's really
Well, thanks. Yep. It's not easy because it's time consuming, and having all new physicians, because we're
yes.
in is challenging, but we had to do it, and we've done it. And so that's a big step. And so many of the people that you deal with that are retired probably move
Right.
from a cold climate like Detroit or Michigan or Ohio to a warmer climate. And they need to do that. And so it's extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what is your vision for the proper group going forward? We're looking at, today you literally launched the company last year. What do you envision in 5 years? You've got a huge consortium of people. What are you and your team out and about doing?
Well, right now I'm working with, when I was at the University of Toledo, I was also a professor. I taught public relations and marketing. And one of my very first students now is in the middle of his career in Cincinnati. And he has joined the proper group. And he brings a different skill base than I have, mostly in digital, and worked for Gannett, USA Today, and Cincinnati Enquirer. So I brought him, and I have an intern that's at the University of Notre Dame, getting her master's in nonprofit management. And so I'm hoping that we can develop a strong business that basically does the backroom work for organizations like accounting, like branding, like marketing, or enrollment. And so it allows particularly a nonprofit, to concentrate on its mission, rather than when I was CEO of the Children's Foundation, we outsourced IT, we outsourced HR, we outsourced finance. And so it allowed me as the CEO to work on the mission. So my vision for the proper group is to gain some exposure by being successful with a company here and a company there, and then having a strong reputation as a group of people that makes organizations stronger and allows them to concentrate on their mission, and leave that with a younger group of people, like the young man I mentioned. His name is Mike, like Mike and Caitlin, the intern. And so my vision for 5 years is to build this business up, to have a whole cadre of clients and a reputation that we are the go-to source if you need somebody to help you manage your backroom type of work.
That's a wonderful vision. I know it will come true with you at the
Well, I
help.
hope so.
Yes, I think so. So I know we've been talking for a bit, and I think we must have you back because I've got a lot more questions. But if we are to leave our audience with a few thoughts of maybe what it's like to retire, or your advice to people that may or may not be retiring, but in and around retirement, what would be your heartfelt sentences?
Well, thanks. So I would first say, give it a lot of thought of why you're retiring. In my case, it was a choice I made. In some cases, as I mentioned, it's not a choice. And then think strategically on how you want to take the things you learned in your career and continue the things that you love or have passion for in some way. And develop a game plan and write everything down and develop a strategy. Like you're even if you don't start a business like I did, that you yourself are your own little business, and you're going to determine what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And then also I would make sure that people realize that when you're no longer, like when I was no longer the president of the foundation, it was harder to get people to call me back and harder for people. And I didn't have that sort of professional clout, and to prepare yourself for that so you don't get discouraged that that you don't have as much influence as maybe you had, and that people aren't calling you, and that people at work that you thought that you'd stay in contact with that are too busy with their own lives and they're not in contact. So, you know, you can't lose faith in yourself, in the relationships you've built, and you just those people that have children and grandchildren, they have that built in. My wife and I don't have that. And so I've had to make sure that I am in a good place as it relates to, you know, what I'm going to do and the relationships I'm building and the ones that I have. And that takes some thought and planning.
Yes, it does. So I want to thank you, Larry, so much for your wonderful conversation this afternoon. And I know that the audience will be so excited to learn from you and to embrace your beautiful tactics of how to live in and around retirement. And to those of you that are listening, please like and support our YouTube channel. And until the next podcast, I'm wishing everyone an awesome holiday 2023, and we're soon to be 2024. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.